Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She said it with a smirk. Touch me only when I say you can. It wasn't playful. It wasn't a joke. It was control, thinly disguised as confidence. The kind of statement that tells you exactly how far things have fallen without needing to raise a voice. We were in the kitchen, a quiet Tuesday night, the hum of the fridge louder than either of us. I stood there for a second, looking at her, the woman who once couldn't keep her hands off me, now laying down rules like a warden. She grabbed her phone, scrolled through something meaningless, and added, "You should try listening for once." I didn't argue. I didn't ask why. I just said calmly, "Cool. Bills work the same way now." She froze. The words landed like a cold wind through the room. I didn't raise my tone or look away, just turned off the light above the stove and walked past her. Her name was Vanessa. We'd been married 7 years. 7 years of building something that looked perfect on the outside. Dinners at Olive Garden on Fridays, new furniture from Target every spring, matching smiles for her Instagram posts. But behind those smiles, there was distance. And not the kind you could fix with apologies or flowers. The kind that comes from slow resentment, the invisible decay of respect. It started small. She'd stop answering my texts during the day. Then she'd start treating affection like currency, only given when things went her way. Every act of closeness had become a negotiation. The warmth we once had was now scheduled, approved, and rationed. That night after her little announcement, I slept on the couch. Not because she asked me to, but because I wanted to. The silence felt better than the tension. Around 2 a.m., I woke to the sound of her pacing upstairs. She was probably waiting for me to come up, to play the role of the guilty husband who couldn't sleep without her forgiveness. But I didn't move. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, realizing something that hit harder than her words. She hadn't taken my power. I'd given it to her. Every time I explained myself, every time I bent just to keep the peace. That night was the first time I stopped trying. Not to win her back, not to prove a point, just to reclaim the one thing I'd lost without noticing. My silence. The morning after that conversation, the house felt different. Quiet, but not peaceful. More like the silence that follows a storm when you know another one's coming. Vanessa moved around the kitchen in her robe, phone in one hand, iced coffee in the other. She didn't say good morning. She didn't even look at me. I made my own coffee, black, no sugar. She hated when I did that, said it made the house smell too bitter. But I didn't care. I sat at the counter, scrolling through my emails, pretending to focus while she rehearsed her little act of indifference. When she finally spoke, her tone was light but sharp. She said she was meeting a friend for lunch. "Don't wait up," she added, slipping her sunglasses on. She didn't notice the quiet way I smiled. Or maybe she did and just didn't know what it meant. As soon as the door closed, I opened my laptop and started checking the joint account. It wasn't about spying, it was about clarity. Over the past few months, money had started disappearing in small amounts. Little transfers, new names on credit card statements, dinners that didn't include me. I never confronted her about them. Not yet. By noon, she posted a photo online. A plate of food, a cocktail, and a caption, "Finally learning to put myself first." It got hundreds of likes. The comments were all the same. "You deserve it, girl, self-care queen." None of them knew the truth. They never do. That night, she came home later than usual, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers. I didn't ask. She looked at me, expecting anger, but all she got was calm silence. That was when the balance started to shift. The next morning, she opened the fridge and found a note where her oat milk used to be. It said, "Bills work the same way now." Her eyes darted to the counter. No card, no cash. I'd moved everything to a private account overnight. She asked what that meant. I told her it meant exactly what she'd taught me. Everything now happens on her permission, just not the way she expected. That weekend, I didn't argue, didn't explain. I just watched her world get smaller, one habit at a time. No fights, no warnings. Just quiet, deliberate distance. And that's when she realized, control cuts both ways. By the third day, she started to notice what silence really felt like. No morning texts. No coffee waiting. No bills paid. No small gestures she'd gotten used to pretending not to see. She walked around the house like a stranger, checking drawers, opening the fridge, staring at the empty space where comfort used to live. I watched her from across the room, quiet, calm, detached. She asked if I was trying to prove a point. I told her there was nothing to prove, just balance. She didn't know what to do with that answer, so she laughed, the kind of nervous laugh people give when they realize they've lost control. That evening, I came home from work with a bag from Target. Inside were groceries, just for me. I cooked dinner in silence while she scrolled through her phone, pretending to be uninterested but watching every move I made. I plated my food, sat down, and ate without saying a word. She waited, expecting me to offer her some. I didn't. She broke first. She said I was being petty, that marriage wasn't supposed to be a competition. I told her she was right. It's supposed to be a partnership. Then I went back to eating. She didn't say another word. Later that night, she tried a different approach. She walked into the room wearing one of those things she used to wear when she wanted attention. I looked at her, calm, steady, unbothered. She waited for a reaction. When she didn't get one, she sighed and asked if I was really going to act like she didn't exist. I said softly, "You told me to only touch you when you said I could. I'm just following instructions." Her eyes shifted, anger first, then confusion, then something close to regret. She turned away without replying. The sound of her heels against the hardwood echoed like a metronome of defeat. That night, I lay in bed alone, the room darker than usual. But for the first time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. In the morning, she tried to act normal again, made breakfast, smiled, asked how I slept. I told her I slept well. And I had, because I'd finally stopped waking up to fix someone who never wanted to meet me halfway. The power she thought she had wasn't gone. It was just back where it belonged. By the end of the week, she wasn't pretending anymore. The confidence she wore like perfume had started to fade. The makeup stayed on longer, the smiles didn't reach her eyes, and the tone in her voice had changed. Less arrogance, more uncertainty. I didn't push. I didn't gloat. I just watched the shift happen in real time. When Friday came, she asked if we could go out for dinner, like before. Her voice carried that soft edge people use when they're trying to sound casual, but means something else. I said sure, knowing exactly what this dinner would be, a negotiation disguised as a reconnection. We went to Olive Garden. Same table we always sat at, same empty small talk about work and weather. But she wasn't focused on the meal. She kept watching me, studying me. Maybe she was looking for the old version of me, the one who used to hang on her every word, who used to take the blame just to end the argument. But that man was gone. Halfway through dinner, she leaned in and said she missed how things used to be. I didn't answer. She kept talking, trying to fill the silence. Then she said, almost like a confession, "I thought you'd fight for me." I looked at her for a long moment and said, "I did. You just didn't notice because you were busy winning." That stopped her. For once, she didn't have a comeback. She looked down at her drink, eyes glassy. The waitress came by to ask if we needed anything else. I said no. We sat in silence until the check came. When it did, I let it sit there between us. She looked at me, waiting for me to grab it like always. I didn't move. Finally, she reached for her purse. Her hands were trembling just enough for me to notice. That was the moment she understood. Control feels powerful until it's no longer yours. Back home, she didn't say a word. She went straight upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and stayed there for hours. I sat on the couch, sipping coffee from a Starbucks cup I'd picked up earlier, watching the clock tick past midnight. I didn't feel anger or triumph. I just felt distance, clean, final distance. The kind that doesn't need noise or revenge to make its point. And in that silence, something inside me settled. She was finally learning what I'd already mastered. The cost of control is always loneliness. The next morning, she was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that hides anger, the kind that hides fear. She sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, trying to act normal. But the energy in the room was different. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the tone. I was. When I grabbed my keys, she asked where I was going. I told her it didn't matter. She looked up, eyes sharp again, but the edge was duller now. She wasn't used to not knowing. I could see it. It unsettled her. I didn't tell her that I'd started spending my mornings at a small diner across town. It was quiet there, the kind of place where no one asked questions. I'd sit with my coffee, read, sometimes just stare out the window and think. That hour of peace before the day started, it felt like oxygen. Back at home, She was unraveling. Small signs at first. She'd check my phone when I wasn't around. Ask passive questions like, "You've been busy lately?" Or, "You seem different." I never took the bait. I just smiled, told her everything was fine, and went back to whatever I was doing. Then came the moment that shifted everything again. One night, while we were sitting on the couch, she reached out, her hand brushing mine like nothing had happened. It was the first time she'd touched me in weeks. I didn't move, didn't react. I just let her feel the absence of connection she'd created. After a few seconds, she pulled her hand back and whispered, "You're really not going to say anything, are you?" I looked at her calmly and said, "You told me to touch you only when you say I can. You haven't said it yet." Her face changed. Anger flickered, then faded into something else, realization. The kind that hits late, when the game stops being fun. She stood up, walked away, and shut herself in the bedroom again. That night, I slept soundly. Not because things were fixed, but because I wasn't trapped in the cycle anymore. In the morning, I woke up before her, made coffee, and left a small note on the counter. "Bills are due tomorrow." Nothing more. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. She'd wanted control. Now she had it, all of it. And for the first time, she didn't seem to want it anymore. She started changing after that note. The arrogance that once filled every room she walked into was gone. Now she moved carefully, speaking softer, watching me out of the corner of her eye like she was waiting for a signal that never came. It was strange, watching the woman who once demanded control, now trying to earn attention. But I didn't rush to give it. One morning, I woke up to the smell of pancakes. She hadn't cooked in months. The table was set, plates, syrup, coffee brewing. She smiled when I walked in, pretending like this was normal. I just nodded, poured myself a cup, and sat down. She started talking about random things: work, neighbors, the weather, small talk, safe topics. I listened, not because I cared about the words, but because I was studying her tone. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was effort. Halfway through breakfast, she leaned forward and said she'd been thinking, that she wanted to start over. I didn't answer right away. I just sipped my coffee and asked, "Start what over?" She hesitated, realizing there wasn't much left to rebuild. Finally, she said she missed us. I didn't argue. I simply said, "You don't miss me. You miss control." Her eyes dropped to the table. She didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. Over the next few days, she tried again and again to get close. Small touches, lingering looks, late-night conversations about how things used to be. I stayed neutral. No cruelty, no affection, just calm distance. It wasn't revenge. It was reflection. I was giving her back the same emptiness she'd once given me. Then one night, she broke. She said she couldn't sleep anymore, that she felt like she was living with a stranger. I told her she wasn't. She was just finally seeing me the way I'd seen her all along. Present, but unseen. She cried then. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet tears that fell into her hands as she whispered that she never meant for it to go this far. I didn't comfort her. I just stood up, grabbed my jacket, and said, "You wanted distance." I just made it real. When I left the house that night, the silence didn't follow me anymore. It stayed behind, with her. Because the thing about power is, once you use it to control love, it always ends the same way. You win the argument, and lose the person. I didn't go far that night. Just drove around the city with the windows down, letting the cool air clear my head. I stopped by a Waffle House on the edge of town, sat at the counter, and ordered black coffee. The waitress didn't ask questions. That was what I liked about the place. Nobody cared who you were, just that you tipped well. I sat there for an hour, thinking about everything. The way things had shifted so quietly. How the woman who once controlled every inch of our marriage was now the one drowning in silence. And yet, I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt detached. I realized revenge wasn't the goal. Peace was. When I got home, the house was dark. She'd left the bedroom light on, though. I could see her shadow through the door, sitting at the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. When I walked in, she didn't look up. She said she thought I wasn't coming back. I told her I hadn't decided yet. That was the truth. She started apologizing again, not with words that asked for forgiveness, but with the kind that tried to erase accountability. She said she didn't know why she'd changed, why she'd pushed me away, why she treated love like a test. I didn't respond. I just let her speak until her voice gave out. Then I said, You wanted to set the rules. I just started following them. Her breathing hitched. I think that was when she finally saw the full picture. That control wasn't freedom. It was a cage she built for both of us. And now, I was the one who had learned how to walk away from it. The next few days were quiet. She stopped trying to talk. She just moved through the house like a ghost, cooking meals she didn't eat, sitting in rooms she didn't belong in anymore. The silence between us had turned into something permanent, something solid. One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the table, one plate in front of her, untouched food gone cold. She looked up and said she'd been waiting. I asked, for what? She said, for you to touch me, for you to forgive me, for you to care again. I looked at her and said softly, you told me to wait for permission. Now you're the one waiting. Then I turned and walked away. And for the first time, she didn't follow. It had been weeks since that night at the table. The house no longer felt like home, more like two people quietly occupying a space that used to mean something. She still cooked, still tried to hold on to the fragments of what we were, but everything between us was hollow now. There were no fights left to have, no affection left to fake, just silence. I'd gotten used to the quiet. It was predictable, almost peaceful. Mornings started with coffee from Starbucks on my way to work. Evenings ended with long drives through empty streets. I'd learned to find calm in distance. But she hadn't. She was restless, trapped in the same silence she once used as a weapon. One night, I came home later than usual. She was sitting on the couch, lights dim, TV off. She said she'd made dinner and waited, but I didn't come. I told her I wasn't hungry. Her voice cracked when she said, you don't even look at me anymore. I sat across from her, not out of cruelty, but clarity. I told her I'd spent months trying to be seen, and when I finally stopped, she started noticing. That was the irony of control. It blinds the one who holds it until it's gone. She tried to reach for me then. Her hand stopped halfway, hesitation in her eyes. She whispered that she didn't want to live like strangers. I told her we already were. She looked down, tears catching in the glow of the lamp, and said she missed the man who used to fight for her. I told her the truth. That man stopped fighting when he realized he was the only one in the ring. She didn't argue. She just sat there, the weight of her choices finally landing. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Not because I wanted her back, but because she was finally understanding what real loss felt like. Before going to bed, I said something I hadn't said in months. You wanted control. Now you have it. But control doesn't keep you warm. I walked upstairs, leaving her there on the couch. She didn't move. When I woke up the next morning, she was still sitting in that same spot, eyes red, plate of cold food untouched beside her. For the first time, she didn't look defiant. She looked human. And in that quiet, I knew she'd finally learned the lesson I never had to teach. Power means nothing when there's no one left to share it with. After that night, everything between us existed in fragments. Short conversations, quiet glances, long silences. She stopped pretending, and so did I. The walls that once held our laughter now just echoed the sound of two people who had nothing left to say. I noticed the change in her routines first. She stopped getting dressed up for work, stopped posting pictures online. The phone that once stayed glued to her hand now sat untouched beside her. Control had slipped through her fingers, and all that was left was the realization of what it had cost. One evening, she walked into the kitchen while I was making coffee. She stood there for a moment before speaking. Her voice was small, almost fragile. She said she didn't know how things got this way, that she'd thought keeping distance would make her feel powerful, but instead it made her feel invisible. I didn't respond. She waited for me to say something, anything, but I just poured my coffee, grabbed my jacket, and said, that's what happens when you turn love into strategy. Then I left. Driving aimlessly became my therapy. I'd take the same route past the old diner, the Walmart parking lot, the places that used to mean something. The city felt different now, cleaner somehow, like I'd finally stepped out of a storm I'd been standing in without realizing it. When I got home that night, she was sitting on the front porch. It was cold, and she was wrapped in a blanket. She looked up when I parked, eyes red but calm. She said she wasn't angry anymore. She said she finally understood that she'd been chasing control because she was afraid of losing love, afraid of not being enough, afraid that if she let go, she'd disappear. I listened. For once, she wasn't performing. There was no pride left, no arrogance, just truth. When she finished, she asked if there was still a chance for us. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her, the woman who had once dictated when I could touch her, now trembling just from standing near me. Finally, I said, maybe, but not on your terms anymore. She nodded slowly, tears falling, but this time there was no fight. She understood. That night, as I went inside, I realized something simple but final. Sometimes reconciliation isn't about going back. It's about meeting again as two new people who finally learned what love isn't. The next morning felt different. The air in the house was heavy but still. For the first time in a long time, there was no tension, just silence that didn't hurt anymore. She was sitting at the kitchen table, wrapped in that same blanket from the night before, staring at a half-empty cup of coffee. She looked exhausted, but not from lack of sleep. From truth. When I walked in, she tried to smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. She said she'd been thinking about everything. About us, about what she'd done, about who she'd become. She said control had made her feel strong for a while, but all it really did was make her lonely. Her voice trembled when she said, I pushed you away to feel powerful, and now I'd give anything just to be close again. I didn't rush to answer. I just stood there, watching her hands shake slightly as she spoke. There was no anger left in me, just clarity. I told her that I didn't stop caring. I just stopped trying to earn something that should have been mutual. She nodded, tears slipping down her face. Then she asked if there was any way back from this. I walked over, sat down across from her, and said quietly, maybe, but not like before. The old way broke us. If there's going to be something new, it starts with respect, not rules. She looked up, eyes wet, and said she understood. That she finally saw how love isn't supposed to be conditional, or cold, or one-sided. I believed her. Maybe for the first time, she was telling the truth. For a while, we just sat there, the morning light stretching across the table between us. There were no promises, no grand gestures, just two people who had finally stopped lying to themselves. When I stood to leave for work, she reached out and touched my hand. It was hesitant, almost scared, like she was asking for permission without words. I didn't pull away. I just looked at her and said, this time, it's not about control. It's about choice. She nodded, holding my hand tighter. As I walked out the door, I realized something simple. Sometimes love doesn't die. It just needs to be stripped of its ego to survive. She once said, touch me only when I say you can. I said, cool. Bills work the same way now. Now she doesn't beg for control. She begs for connection. And for the first time in years, I might just give it to her, on new terms. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.